Sandria Graham, Graham, and I want to speak to you about a job situation that happened about 2 years ago. I had seen that there was an open position as a nutritional instructor at MSU Extension in Novi. So I was excited and yet nervous, and I had requested an interpreter. But I wasn't thinking about requesting a qualified interpreter. I assumed they knew what to do. So they brought in an interpreter, and I asked the interpreter's name because I didn't know who they were. And when I showed up for the interview the day of, there were 4 people on a panel that were interviewing me. So I was quite nervous. But before I had gone into the room for this interview, I was chatting with the interpreter, and it was uncomfortable. I didn't know if this interpreter was qualified or not. So we went in for the interview, and that interpreter didn't understand my finger spelling. It was a big struggle. So the people around had assumed that it was me when it was the interpreter. This interpreter didn't seem to understand me, so I was quite upset. So we got through the interview, and they said, well, we'll get in touch with you in about 2 weeks. So I thought, okay. I left and 2 weeks passed and I never heard a thing. So I thought something was up. I emailed the secretary and told them I hadn't heard anything. After a month, I emailed them again and I still hadn't heard anything. So I had some growing concerns, so I didn't know what to do. After 2 months, I had gone over to VR and I had told them that I still hadn't heard anything, vocational rehab, and that it had been about 4 months. And I asked them if they would get in contact with the secretary to find out what had happened, because I was very concerned about the interpreter I had and whether or not that affected my job interview. So they said that they would get in contact with them and that they would, they got in contact with them and said they would call me in for a second interview. At that time, I had brought in a qualified interpreter, and I found out that the first interpreter that was brought in was only an educational interpreter and wasn't supposed to be doing community work. So once they brought in the qualified interpreter, it was much better. And the boss had even noticed, the interviewer had noticed that the improvement and knew that it was the interpreter and not me. And within the hour, I was hired.